half second. That is all it takes. Studies in telecommunication psychology have actually shown that a delay of just 500 milliseconds on a video call makes people subconsciously perceive you as less friendly.
Wow.
Yeah, less focused and less competent. So, welcome to the Deep Dive. Today's Deep Dive is for Pathlight English, and we are unpacking the hidden psychology and, well, the linguistics of the remote meeting.
Right, which is so relevant right now.
Absolutely. If you are a professional operating in English as a second language, specifically at that, B1 or B2 level, you already know that remote communication can feel like, well, navigating a minefield blindfolded.
Oh, for sure. It's incredibly stressful.
It really is. So to help with this, we are going to look at a highly specialized language guide today. It gives you the exact tools to not just survive, but, actively dominate the modern video call.
And the anthropological reality behind that 500 millisecond delay statistic you mentioned, it's genuinely fascinating, and it kind of sets the stage for everything we are going to explore today.
Right. Tell me more about that. Well, human brains have evolved over hundreds of thousands of years to require immediate synchronous feedback. So when we communicate around a physical campfire, or, in a traditional boardroom, we are constantly analyzing micro-expressions.
Yeah, reading the room, basically.
Exactly. We overlap our murmurs of agreement. We create a shared, continuous rhythm. Latency, even a microscopic amount of it, just completely destroys that rhythm.
It really does. It feels so jarring.
It introduces this unnatural void into the conversation, and human beings instinctively fill communication voids with negative assumptions.
That makes total sense. We assume the other person just isn't listening, or they don't care, or they simply do not understand.
We assume the worst.
And if you're an English language learner, that latency is your absolute worst enemy. Let's think about the cognitive load happening here. You are already translating complex business concepts into a second language in real time.
Which is exhausting on its own.
Completely. Plus, you are listening to multiple different regional accents, all compressed through, terrible audio codecs.
Yeah, the robotic voices.
Exactly. Your brain is essentially a computer processor running at 99% capacity. So when the technology glitches, you just don't have the mental bandwidth left to invent a perfectly polite, grammatically correct response on the spot.
Which is precisely why the source material we are examining today is so incredibly valuable. We are strictly avoiding general workplace small talk in this deep dive.
Right, no chatting about the weather.
Exactly. We aren't discussing how to negotiate a salary or how to chat by the virtual water cooler. We are drilling exclusively into the most high-stakes moments of a video call, joining, interrupting, clarifying, and reporting.
Because those are the moments that can make or break your professional image.
Yes. The core thesis of this guide is that because you lack physical presence, and because the timing is fundamentally broken by technology, your words must act as highly engineered, pre-memorized tools.
Pre-memorized tools, I like that.
You don't need to be fluent in every aspect of the English language. You just need fluency in these specific mechanical transitions.
I want to frame this with an analogy before we get into the exact phrases. Trying to have a complex, nuanced business discussion over a video call is sort of like trying to communicate through a slightly foggy window.
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
Right, because you can kind of see the person on the other side, but the edges are blurry. You cannot read the tension in their shoulders. You cannot see if they are, tapping their pen in frustration under the desk.
The nonverbal data is just gone.
Exactly. Because all of that nonverbal data is lost in the fog, the words you choose have to do double the work. They have to cut through the haze with absolute precision.
They have to be incredibly sharp.
Yeah. So let's trace the chronological journey of a high-stakes remote meeting, starting from the exact second you click that join link.
Let's do it. Because the first 10 seconds of a video call are disproportionately critical. This is where presence is established.
A first impression.
Right. And yet, it is where the vast majority of professionals, native and non-native speakers alike, make their very first linguistic mistake. They drop into the digital room, see a grid of silent faces staring back at them, and they simply say, hello, into the void.
I do that all the time. It's such a natural instinct. You enter a room, you say hello.
Of course. But on a video call, hello is an incredibly weak tool. It is a social greeting when what you actually need in that exact moment is a technical diagnostic.
Oh, a technical diagnostic. That makes sense.
Yeah. If I log in and just say, hello, someone might nod, or they might type hi in the chat, or they might just smile at their camera, but a smile does not tell me if my microphone is actually picking up my voice clearly, or if I sound like a robot underwater.
Right, because you can't hear yourself the way they hear you. And this leads us to the first highly engineered phrase from our guide, which is, can everyone hear me?
It seems incredibly basic, I know.
It does. But let's break down the power dynamics of this specific sentence. When you ask, can everyone hear me? You are not asking for a social pleasantry.
No, not at all.
You are asking a direct, binary yes or no question about a physical reality. It forces someone on the other end to actually evaluate the quality of your audio, unmute their own microphone, and give you a verbal confirmation.
Yes. The source material gives a great mini dialogue to illustrate this. You drop into the call and say, hi, everyone, can everyone hear me? And a colleague responds, yes, we can hear you clearly.
It's so clean. You have instantly established your audio footprint. Yep. You aren't guessing if you're on mute.
Exactly. Furthermore, from a psychological standpoint, asking a direct question the moment you enter the room establishes a subtle authority.
I didn't even think of that.
Yeah, you are managing the meeting's infrastructure from second one. You are demanding a response, and the room complies. For a B1 or B2 learner, taking control of the room in the first 5 seconds builds immense internal confidence for the rest of the hour.
That is such a good point. But let's look at the dark side of that infrastructure. What happens when the answer is no? Or what happens 20 minutes into the meeting when your screen suddenly freezes, the audio sounds like a skipping record, and, well, panic sets in.
It's a horrible feeling.
It really is. The instinct for an English learner in a moment of panic is to revert to the absolute simplest vocabulary possible. If I am stressed, my brain just wants to yell, my Wi-Fi is bad, or my internet is broken.
Right, it's a fight or flight response.
Yeah, but the guide explicitly warns against this, providing a very different tool. I am having trouble with my connection.
That phrase is an absolute masterclass in professional self-preservation. Let's analyze the linguistics of blame here.
The linguistics of blame. Okay, I'm listening.
When you say, my internet is bad or my Wi-Fi is broken, it sounds profoundly domestic. It evokes an image of a cheap router in your living room.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
It sounds like someone in the next room is downloading a massive file and stealing your bandwidth. Subconsciously, the other people on the call register this as a personal organizational failure on your part. It becomes a you problem.
That is a terrifying realization. I mean, I am suddenly being judged on my home network setup.
Exactly.
My internet is bad.
Yeah.
Almost makes it sound like I forgot to pay my broadband bill this month. It completely strips away the professional veneer.
Precisely. Now, examine the alternative, I am having trouble with my connection. The word connection performs a brilliant sociolinguistic trick.
How so?
Well, a connection is an invisible bridge that exists between 2 points. It requires infrastructure from both sides to maintain. By blaming the connection, you are elevating the glitch from a personal, domestic failure to a shared enterprise-level infrastructure issue.
That is so subtle but so powerful.
You are no longer a disorganized person with bad Wi-Fi. You are a calm professional dealing with an unfortunate systemic anomaly.
You are literally shielding your professional reputation through vocabulary selection. I mean, if the project manager says, your audio's cutting out, we missed that last point, and you respond with, sorry, I am having trouble with my connection, you have completely neutralized the blame.
Exactly. You've identified the technical culprit, and you haven't lost an ounce of credibility.
It is a protective barrier for your personal brand.
And that protective barrier is especially crucial for non-native speakers who already battle the unfair perception that a lack of linguistic fluency equates to a lack of professional competence.
Which is so unfair, but true.
You have to aggressively protect your competence triggers. Using precise, elevated language during a technical failure is a massive competence trigger.
Okay, so we've successfully joined the call. We've forced the room to confirm our audios is working, and we know exactly how to clinically describe a technical failure if one happens. But now the real challenge begins.
The meeting itself.
Right. The meeting is flowing, the digital traffic is moving fast, and you realize you need to speak. In a physical conference room, this is easy. You just lean forward in your squeaky leather chair, you take a sharp, visible breath, you make direct eye contact with the speaker.
And the speaker naturally winds down their point to let you in.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But on a video call, all of those cues are gone.
We call this the problem of the digital collision Because of that latency we discussed earlier, by the time you realize there is a pause in the conversation, physically click the unmute button and begin to speak, the original speaker has already started their next sentence.
It's the worst. You end up crashing into each other.
Yes. Then you both stop, apologize, and a horrible, awkward dance begins where no one knows who should go next.
No, you go ahead. No, sorry, you go.
Okay.
It's so painful. And for a B1 or B2 learner, that awkward collision is often so agonizing that they choose the alternative total silence. They just sit there, mute, for the entire hour.
Which is a huge loss for the team.
It is. I want to address the cultural context here, too. In many global cultures, interrupting a superior or a senior colleague is considered a profound breach of professional etiquette. It is deeply disrespectful.
Very true.
But the guide we are analyzing suggests that in standard Western English-speaking corporate environments, the rules are fundamentally different.
That is a vital distinction to make. In high-context cultures, silence is often a sign of deep respect and active listening. But in low-context, Anglo-American corporate cultures, silence is frequently interpreted as a lack of engagement, a lack of preparation, or a lack of value.
Right. If you aren't talking, they think you have nothing to contribute.
Exactly. In these environments, politely interjecting into a fast-moving conversation is actually viewed as a sign of leadership and ownership. You are proving that you're deeply engaged with the material, but you need the right vehicle to merge into that traffic safely.
Which brings us to the phrase, "Can I jump in for a second?" The guide notes that jump in is a natural, slightly informal phrasal verb that has become the gold standard for standard business meetings.
It's a great phrase.
It is. Imagine trying to merge onto a busy, multi-lane highway. You are stuck on the on-ramp, cars are flying by at 80 miles an hour, and there's no obvious gap. You cannot just close your eyes and swerve into the lane. You have to use a technique.
Or think of a game of double Dutch jump rope. Two people are swinging the ropes violently. You are standing on the outside. You have to find the rhythm, announce your movement, and jump.
Yes, that's exactly it.
The verb jump captures the necessary kinetic energy. You cannot slowly and timidly wade into a fast-paced video call because you will just be run over by the audio delay.
So true.
But the true psychological genius of this phrase is the second half, "for a second." Let's look at the cognitive framing happening there.
Well, if you just unmute and say, "Can I speak now?" It feels heavy.
Very heavy.
It feels confrontational, almost like you were demanding to take over the entire presentation. It makes the current speaker defensive.
Exactly. The human ego does not like yielding the floor, but when you append "for a second," you are performing a verbal magic trick. You are promising the current speaker that you are not staging a coup. You are not going to steal the microphone and talk for 10 minutes. You are asking for a microscopic, almost imperceptible sliver of time. 1 second.
Even if the reality is that your point takes 2 or 3 minutes to explain.
Right. The literal duration does not actually matter. The phrase is purely social lubrication. By asking for such an absurdly small amount of time, you completely disarm the speaker's defensiveness.
They don't feel threatened.
Exactly. Their brain processes the request 1 second and subconsciously concludes, yes, I can afford to pause my brilliant monologue for 1 single second. They yield the floor willingly. You have successfully navigated the jump rope without tripping anyone.
Let's play out the mini dialogue for this. A senior manager is wrapping up a point saying, "So we really should decide on the vendor today before the end of the quarter." And you seamlessly cut the audio with, "Can I jump in for a second?"
It is smooth, it is confident, and it is entirely unthreatening.
But what if the conversation is so intense or the speaker is so dominant that asking for permission isn't enough? You just need to forcibly stop the traffic.
That is when you need to deploy the heavier tool in the toolkit. When a question is no longer sufficient, you have to use a declarative interruption. Sorry to interrupt, but...
Now, I want to challenge the linguistics of this phrase for a second. For an English language learner trying to project confidence, apologizing feels counterintuitive.
It does seem strange at first glance.
Right. Why am I saying sorry? I am participating in a business meeting. I am doing my job. I haven't committed a moral wrong. I didn't spill coffee on anyone. Why must I apologize for speaking?
You are touching on a fascinating quirk of the English language. We need to decouple the word sorry from the concept of genuine remorse.
Okay, decouple it. How?
If you accidentally step on someone's foot, you offer a moral apology. You feel bad. But in the context of a video call, sorry to interrupt, is a purely functional ceremonial apology.
A functional apology. Let's dig into that. What function is it actually serving?
Think about driving a car again. When you are on the highway and you decide to change lanes, you flip on your turn signal. That blinking light is not asking the other drivers for permission to move, nor is it apologizing for moving.
Right. It's just a heads up.
Exactly. It is a warning mechanism. It says, I'm altering the current flow of traffic, so adjust your expectations immediately. Sorry to interrupt. Is your verbal turn signal. Because you are reaching through the digital fog and abruptly grabbing the steering wheel of the meeting, the ceremonial apology softens the whiplash for everyone else.
It mitigates the shock of the collision. That translates to, I acknowledge I am breaking your flow, brace yourselves.
Perfectly said.
That makes perfect sense. The guide, however, attaches a very stern warning to the usage of this specific phrase. It says that if you use, sorry to interrupt, but Bird, you must keep your actual interruption incredibly brief. Why is that rule so strict?
Because of the social contract you just initiated with the turn signal. If you cut in front of someone on the highway using your signal, but then immediately hit your brakes and drive 10 miles an hour, the driver behind you is going to be furious.
Oh, absolutely.
You use the polite protocol, but you abuse the outcome. When you say sorry to interrupt, you are acknowledging that you are a temporary disruption. If you then launch into a sprawling 5-minute monologue about your weekend or a completely unrelated project, you violate the unwritten contract of the phrase.
You abuse the turn signal.
Exactly. You state your point, you ask your question, and you immediately hand the steering wheel back.
For example, the manager says, the next step is to send the finalized file to the client. You cut in, sorry to interrupt, but which file version do you mean, V2 or V3? You get your answer, and you mute yourself again. It is surgical.
Surgical is the exact word. You get in, extract the necessary data, and get out without causing a massive bleed in the meeting's momentum.
And that surgical extraction brings us to the next massive hurdle of the remote meeting. Usually the precise reason you just engage your turn signal and interrupt the flow is because you are lost.
Which happens to everyone.
All the time. The audio cut out for 3 seconds, or the speaker used a 3-letter corporate acronym you've never heard of.
Yeah.
Or the instructions were terrifyingly vague. You are sitting in the digital fog, and you need clarity.
This is the nexus of imposter syndrome for B1 and B2 learners, the absolute terror of looking incompetent in front of native speakers.
Exactly. I want to unpack the emotional reality of this moment. If a senior director is outlining a critical project timeline, and you interrupt to say, could you clarify that? Now, does it not sound like you were daydreaming?
Yeah.
Doesn't it flag you as the slowest person in the digital room?
That is the fear, yes.
The fear is that the native speakers will roll their eyes and think, oh, their English isn't good enough to keep up. So the learner chooses silence. They choose to guess.
And choosing to guess is the most catastrophic mistake you can make in modern business. Let's completely invert this misconception. We need to look at this through the lens of organizational risk management.
But risk management.
Staying silent when instructions are vague is not protecting your reputation. It is setting a time bomb that will detonate when you deliver the wrong work a week later. Asking for clarification does not signal linguistic weakness. It signals extreme professional rigor.
How so? Walk me through the psychology of the person receiving the question.
Let's look at the guide's example scenario. Speaker A, perhaps a manager, says, we need the marketing draft soon.
Ooh, soon.
Exactly. Soon is a lethally dangerous word in corporate English. My definition of soon might be next Friday. The manager's definition of soon might be in 45 minutes.
Right, huge difference.
If you say, could you clarify that? Do you mean today or tomorrow in our group? You are not proving that you failed to listen. You are proving that you listened so intensely that you identified a critical operational ambiguity. You are catching a trap before the entire team falls into it.
You are demanding precision. You are forcing the speaker to be accountable for their own vague language. It actually shifts the subtle power dynamic back to you.
It does. In a physical office, a manager might look around the room, see your furrowed brow, realize they were being vague, and naturally correct themselves. On a video call, surrounded by 20 tiny squares on a screen, they cannot see your furrowed brow.
You have to speak up.
You have to verbalize the confusion. Could you clarify that? Is the auditory equivalent of leaning across the table and saying, let's make sure we get this right. It is the mark of a highly engaged, detail-oriented professional.
It is the antidote to the misunderstanding tax that remote teams pay when they have to redo projects. Now, the guide offers a second tool for this exact scenario, and it is arguably the most powerful phrase in the entire document. It takes clarification to the absolute highest level.
I love this one.
Just to make sure I understand.
This is a phenomenal linguistic strategy. It is what communication experts refer to as the echo technique.
The phrase is used immediately before repeating what you just heard back to the speaker. The usage note explicitly states that this phrase actively prevents disastrous misunderstandings. The example sentence is, "Just to make sure I understand, we are sending the draft today."
It creates an instant feedback loop.
And the mini dialogue shows a high-stakes correction. Speaker A says, "We will review the documents after lunch." Speaker B interjects, "Just to make sure I understand, you want the draft sent to you before lunch."
We need to talk about the concept of mental alignment. In any conversation, but especially across language barriers and digital lag, you have a picture in your head of what was just agreed upon, and I have a picture in my head. The probability of those two pictures matching perfectly is shockingly low.
So true.
The echo technique forces us to compare our pictures in real time.
I love thinking of it as demanding a receipt for the conversation. If you buy a television, you don't leave the store without a receipt. If the TV is broken when you get home, the receipt is your proof of the transaction. If you don't use this phrase to summarize the meeting, you are leaving the digital room without a receipt. You are buying the misunderstanding with no return policy.
That is a brilliant way to conceptualize it. You are generating a verbal receipt. But let's analyze why the framing device, the actual words, just to make sure I understand, is so critical. Why can't I just immediately repeat their words back to them?
Right.
If the boss says, review it after lunch, why can't I just say, you want it before lunch?
Because that sounds aggressive. It sounds like you are interrogating them.
Exactly. It feels like a cross-examination. It puts the speaker on the defensive. By prefacing the echo with, just to make sure I understand, you are taking the burden of potential ignorance entirely onto your own shoulders.
You're playing the humble student.
Yes. You are saying, my comprehension might be flawed here, please help me. It is a display of humility that paradoxically allows you to take total control of the alignment process. You present your understanding, and you give them a 3-second window to either confirm it or immediately correct it.
If Speaker B is wrong, Speaker A immediately says, "Oh no, take your time. The end of the day is totally fine." You just invested 5 seconds of bravery to speak up, and you saved yourself 5 hours of panicked, unnecessary work trying to finish a draft before lunch.
It is the ultimate preventative medicine for remote work.
It really is. And again, to a native speaker's ears, this phrase screams competence. It shows you are actively synthesizing the information and taking ownership of the next steps.
Exactly.
Okay, let's map where we are in this hypothetical meeting. We joined seamlessly. We navigated the digital traffic to interrupt politely. We clarified the vague instructions and generated our verbal receipts. But eventually, the dynamic of every meeting shifts. You're no longer reacting to other people. The room falls silent. The spotlight swings entirely to you.
The dreaded status update?
Right. The project manager looks at your square on the screen and says, "So, what is the status of your deliverables?" You had to share an update.
For many language learners, transitioning from active listening to active presenting is the most terrifying phase of the call. You are suddenly carrying the entire weight of the meeting's attention. The cognitive load spikes drastically.
You don't want to ramble, but you also don't want to sound underprepared. The guide provides phrase number 7 to manage this exact transition perfectly. Here's a quick update.
So simple, yet so effective.
The usage note explains that deploying this phrase right before delivering your progress report immediately makes you sound highly organized.
It is all about cognitive framing for the listener.
I think of this phrase like creating a new folder on your computer desktop. If you just start throwing random files onto your screen, it is a chaotic mess. Nobody knows where to look. If you start answering the manager's question by immediately listing raw data, well, the numbers are up 10%, and I called the client in Berlin, but the server is acting weird. Your listeners' brains have to scramble to figure out the context.
They get lost immediately.
They are frantically trying to organize the data you're throwing at them.
And because it's a video call, half of them were probably secretly checking their emails anyway. They weren't paying full attention until they heard their name or your project mentioned.
Exactly. So when you say, "Here is a quick update," you are literally telling their brains, create a new folder. Label it update. Stop looking at your email, look at my square, and prepare to file the next 3 sentences I say into this folder.
You are preparing their palette for the information.
The example from the text is simple. Here's a quick update on the project. When Speaker A asks, Can you tell us where things stand? You don't panic. You deploy the macro. Sure. Here's a quick update.
We also must analyze the immense heavy lifting being done by the word quick. Much like the phrase, for a second, minimize the interruption earlier, the word quick makes a subconscious promise to the executives on the call.
Right, because time is money.
In modern corporate culture, brevity is treated as a moral virtue. Executive time is the most expensive commodity in the room. When you promise a quick update, you are signaling profound respect for their time. You are assuring them that you are not going to drag them into the weeds of your daily struggles. You're going to be efficient, high-level, and professional.
It is an illusion of brevity that guarantees their attention. If you promise it will be quick, they will actually listen to the whole thing. But this raises a very sensitive issue. What if your update isn't entirely positive?
Ah, the bad news update.
Right. What if you are blocked? Reporting a delay in a second language is a minefield. You want to explain why it isn't done, but you are terrified of sounding like you are making excuses.
Reporting a dependency without sounding defensive is an advanced sociolinguistic skill. If you get it wrong, you either look incompetent or you look like you are maliciously throwing a colleague under the bus.
This brings us to the final phrase in our toolkit, designed specifically for this high-wire act. I am still waiting on one thing. The meaning provided is incredibly precise. You use this when one part of your work is not finished strictly because you need something else from someone else.
It shifts the focus beautifully.
The example sentence is, I am still waiting on one thing before I can finish. Speaker A asks, is the report ready? You answer, almost. I am still waiting on one thing.
There is a critical, subtle linguistic distinction highlighted in the usage note here that we absolutely must dissect. The guide points out that in this specific corporate context, the phrase waiting on operates as a replacement for waiting for.
Let's really push into that. Why make that substitution? From a textbook grammar perspective, waiting for is perfectly correct. I am waiting for the bus. I am waiting for the file. Why does waiting for fail in a corporate video call?
It fails because of the psychological posture it implies. When you use the preposition for, you position yourself as a passive receiver. The action is coming toward you and you have zero control over it.
Like you're just sitting there.
Think of the play Waiting for Godot. The characters are completely helpless, sitting by a tree, waiting for someone who never arrives. If you tell your boss, I'm waiting for the data from the finance team, the subconscious image is that you are sitting at your desk, staring blankly at your screen, doing absolutely nothing, playing the victim.
Oh, I see.
It sounds deeply passive and often slightly defensive. Don't blame me, I'm just waiting.
Wow.
Yeah?
It strips you of your agency. You sound helpless. So how does waiting on change that dynamic?
Think about the preposition on. It implies position, pressure, or active service. A waiter waits on a table, right? They are actively managing the needs of the guests. In modern, agile corporate speak, waiting on has evolved to imply active dependency management.
That's a great distinction.
When you say, I am waiting on the finance team for the data, it suggests that you have already sent the emails, you have followed up, you are monitoring the situation, and you are ready to execute the second the data arrives. You are applying pressure.
That is an astonishingly subtle sociolinguistic shift. Waiting for is a state of being. Waiting on is a state of action. If someone asks if the massive quarterly report is ready, and you just say, no, finance hasn't sent the numbers, you sound like a complainer.
Exactly.
But if you frame it the way the guide suggests, almost, I am still waiting on one thing, you are telling a masterful story of progress. The word almost defends your work ethic. It says, I have done 99% of my job. And waiting on one thing surgically flags the roadblock without naming names or sounding whiny.
It protects your reputation, it informs the project manager of the bottleneck, and it maintains a completely calm, professional tone. It is the perfect diplomatic tool for a delayed deliverable.
Okay, we have covered an immense amount of theoretical ground. We have analyzed the broken anthropology of the digital void, the protective linguistics of infrastructure blame, the cultural nuances of the ceremonial turn signal, the necessity of the alignment receipt, and the active posture of managing dependencies. But knowing the psychological theory behind a hammer doesn't mean you can build a house.
Exactly. For a B1 or B2 language learner, passive comprehension is only the first step. In the heat of a high-stakes meeting, when the audio lags and your heart rate spikes, you will not have time to intellectually recall the sociolinguistics of the preposition on.
No, you'll freeze.
You need instantaneous muscle memory. You need to be able to reach into the toolkit and pull out the correct sharp phrase without thinking.
So we are going to transition right now into the interactive phase of this deep dive. I like to call this the gauntlet.
I love the sound of that.
I am going to construct a narrative of a single, highly stressful remote meeting. I will put you, the listener, directly in the hot seat across 5 distinct crisis moments. I will describe the scenario, and then I'm going to give you actual silence, a solid few seconds, to mentally retrieve the exact phrase we learned today. Form the words in your mouth. Say it out loud if you are driving or alone in your room. Commit to an answer before the expert reveals the perfect response and explains why the alternatives fail.
This is where active recall cements the learning. Do not just wait for me to give the answer. Force your brain to find the tool.
Here we go. The gauntlet. Situation 1. It is 9 a.m. on a Tuesday. You are logging into the critical kickoff meeting for a new global campaign. You are using a brand new Bluetooth headset. You click the link, the Zoom window expands, and you see 6 senior colleagues staring silently at their webcams. You have no idea if your microphone is routed correctly. You unmute yourself. Do not just say hello. You need a technical diagnostic. What is the precise phrase to use?
Take a second.
What's the phrase?
The engineered response is, "Can everyone hear me?"
If you guess that, perfect. Why does "Am I on?" or "Hello, testing?" fail here? Because they don't demand a verbal confirmation from the grid. "Can everyone hear me?" forces someone to explicitly validate your digital presence. You own the room from the first second. Let's move to situation 2.
Oh. The plot thickens.
We are 20 minutes into the meeting. The director of marketing is outlining the budget. Suddenly, her voice drops an octave and sounds like a slow-motion robot. The video feed stutters and freezes. You realize your home network is failing. The director asks you a direct question, but it was garbled by the lag. You need her to repeat it, but you must protect your professional reputation. You cannot sound like you have cheap equipment. What is the exact phrase to elevate this to an infrastructure issue?
Think about the blame.
What's the phrase?
The protective response is, "I am having trouble with my connection."
Excellent.
Yeah.
If you thought about saying, "My Wi-Fi is down," or "My internet is terrible today," remember the lesson on the linguistics of blame. We do not broadcast domestic failures. We identify shared technical glitches. "I am having trouble with my connection" keeps your competence shield completely intact.
Very true.
Situation 3. The crisis is averted. The meeting continues. However, 2 of your colleagues are now in a passionate, fast-paced debate about the launch timeline. They are talking over each other. You realize they're completely forgetting a crucial regulatory deadline, and if you don't stop them right now, the project will fail. You need to merge into this high-speed traffic. You need to disarm their defensiveness and get a sliver of time. What is the phrase to use?
Remember the jump rope.
What's the phrase?
The disarming response is, "Can I jump in for a second?"
Spot on. You didn't just yell, "Wait, stop talking." You used the kinetic verb jump to match their energy, and you deployed the psychological magic trick of "for a second" to promise the illusion of brevity. You slipped into the jump rope perfectly.
Nice and easy.
Situation 4. You successfully jumped in and reminded them of the regulatory problem. The manager nods, agrees, and says, "Good catch. Let's make sure we pivot the strategy to address that soon." There was that lethal corporate word, "soon." You are the one who has to execute the pivot. You cannot afford to guess what "soon" means. You need to demand precision and catch the trap before it closes. What is the phrase to use? Demand that clarity.
What's the phrase?
The rigorous response is, "Could you clarify that?"
Brilliant.
You are not demonstrating a lack of English comprehension. You are demonstrating extreme professional diligence. You followed up with, "Do you mean pivot by Friday or pivot next month?" You force the alignment and get your verbal receipt.
You got it.
Finally, situation 5. The meeting is wrapping up. The director looks directly at your camera feed. The room falls silent. She says, "Before we sign off, can you tell us where you are at with the vendor contracts?" The spotlight is blinding. You need to organize their attention. You need to create a cognitive folder in their brains before you list your progress. What is the phrase to use?
Set up the folder.
What's the phrase?
The organizational response is, "Here's a quick update."
Perfect. You served the appetizer. You signaled respect for their time with the word "quick," and you framed the narrative so your facts land logically. If you navigated all 5 of those scenarios successfully, you've effectively mastered the hardest mechanical moments of the remote work environment.
If you internalize those responses, your anxiety levels before logging into a call will just plummet. You are no longer improvising in a second language. You are simply executing a proven strategy.
Let's do a comprehensive recap of the entire toolkit we unpacked today. I'm going to read the complete list of all 8 phrases. Treat this as your final auditory checklist. Let the rhythm of these sentences sink into your memory.
This is your cheat sheet.
Number 1,
Yeah.
can everyone hear me? Number 2, I am having trouble with my connection. Number 3, can I jump in for a second?
Yep.
Number 4, sorry to interrupt, but number 5, could you clarify that? Number 6, just to make sure I understand. Number 7, here's a quick update. Number 8, I am still waiting on one thing.
That is a phenomenal, robust toolkit. And the Pathlight English source text leaves us with a highly practical call to action, essentially a piece of homework for everyone listening.
Ooh, homework.
The instruction is this: practice a 30-second video call update using 3 phrases from this episode. And I want to stress, do not wait until your actual 9 a.m. meeting tomorrow to try this. Build the muscle memory in a safe environment.
Where there's no pressure.
Exactly. Open the camera app on your phone, stare at your own face on the screen, and practice stringing them together out loud. For example, look at the lens and say, "Can everyone hear me?" Great. Here is a quick update on the project. I am still waiting on one thing from legal. Speaking the words into the physical air is what bridges the gap between passive theory and active mastery.
I absolutely love that homework.
Yeah.
It is the difference between reading a book about swimming and actually getting into the pool.
Ex-
Before we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a slightly provocative thought to ponder over your next cup of coffee. We spend an inordinate amount of time complaining about video calls. We bemoan the lag, the frozen screens, the lack of eye contact, the exhaustion of the digital fog.
We all complain about it.
But because video calls lack the organic, seamless flow of a physical office, they force us to be incredibly deliberate with our language. In a comfortable physical conference room, we might have been lazy. We might have relied on a nod or a vague gesture instead of verbalizing our alignment. We might never have formalized our thoughts with a phrase like, "just to make sure I understand."
That's very true.
So here's the question to mull over. Has the broken, glitchy imperfection of remote technology actually trained us to communicate with more rigor and precision than we ever did when we were sitting in the same physical room?
That is a profound question to consider. The history of human innovation shows us that sometimes the strictest constraints are exactly what breed the greatest discipline. The foggy window forces us to sharpen the knife.
It really does. Think about that the next time you hear the chime of a meeting starting. Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive. If you found this psychological and linguistic breakdown helpful, and you want to continue mastering the hidden nuances of the language, please remember to subscribe to the Pathlight English channel. We are completely dedicated to bringing you the most practical, insightful tools to accelerate your English journey. Until next time, stay sharp and keep jumping into the conversation.